Hi, welcome back to another class of HSA 6930, Human Resources for Healthcare Organizations. I'm Dr. Jen Crenshaw, and it's great to be with you. I'm going to be chatting with you a little bit about employee life cycle and the different aspects in human resources. You guys have a lot of reading this week, so forgive me for that, but should go pretty quickly. Um, but important that you take a look at like what the different aspects and stages of the employee life cycle and the work of HR. So I'm going to talk a little bit about how I've learned to think about the employee life cycle. I want to get started on that by talking with you a little bit about Dr. David Ulrich. And Dr. Dave Ulrich is one of the world's most influential voices in human resources and leadership. Known as the father of modern HR, he's a professor at the University of Michigan's Ross School of Business and the co-founder of the RBL Group. The RBL Group and their work has influenced me greatly over the last 20 years. The Ulrich has spent decades helping organizations connect people strategy to business success, showing that HR's true purpose is to create value, not just for employees, but for customers, investors, and communities. And that's really what we're going to talk about today is his work that he called HR Outside In. And I'll explain more about that. I just wanted to let you know that, Dr. Ulrich has written over 30 books, advised Fortune 500 companies in more than 90 countries, and has been named the #1 management educator by Business Week. His HR business partner model and outside in thinking have reshaped how leaders see the role of HR as a strategic driver of results, not just a support function. So I wanted to make sure that I gave Dr. Ulrich credit. I would say that he has been the biggest influence in my career, and specifically this idea of human resources outside in. Uh, they wrote, Dr. Ulrich and his colleagues, and I have the reference here on this slide, wrote about the importance of designing every stage of the employee experience through both the eyes of the employee and the external stakeholders, right? That's the idea of outside in. They serve, and so very specifically thinking about the patients that we serve, their families, and the communities, and really thinking about how we design HR, how we measure HR. Yes, certainly for the employees, but through the lens of who are those employees taking care of. And so that is what this week's going to be about. It's what you're going to talk about in your discussion thread. It's what I'm going to go through a little bit with you now here in this video. So look, I think we've long known that the way we treat our people in healthcare determines the way they treat our patients. And that's part of the reason why this is so important. All right. So here are the stages of the employee life cycle. In your textbooks that you'll be reading, that you're reading this week, the chapters, call some of these things by slightly different titles, but these are probably the more common and most straightforward. So, as you know, we have attraction and recruitment, then, of course, onboarding, learning and development, performance and feedback, engagement and culture, one of my favorites, retention and recognition, and then separation and alumni. And I don't think we give enough attention to alumni. Certainly, we get so busy in HR, busy just thinking about the people that we need and then the people that we have, that once folks move on, whether of their choice or ours, we rarely think of them at all. But they are our ambassadors in the community, and so it is important to think about them also. Okay, so what do we mean when we talk about an outside-in focus, specifically when it comes to attraction and recruitment. So look, traditional HR might measure how quickly we're filling positions. Recruiters talk about their time to fill metrics all the time. The encouragement here is that we actually want to be recruiting for mission alignment. That might not always be, you may not always be to fill fast, right? When you're looking for mission alignment, although there are certainly some very great systems that you can put in place so that this doesn't have to slow you down. Just saying that the importance is less on the speed and more on the quality, right? Do our job ads reflect patient-centered values so that we're attracting people who are patient-centered? And are we known in the community as a great place to receive care and to give care, right? So do we have a great reputation in the way we take care of our patients and treat their families and the community? And then also, are we known in the community for being a great place to work and a great place to give care? All right, next up, onboarding, right? Standard onboarding. We're going to have an orientation session. We're going to do paperwork, right? Outside in focus talks more about immersing new hires in the patient experience. Link onboarding to the why of healthcare, connecting their role to outcomes like safety, access, and compassion. And when we set that tone from the start in onboarding, it has much more likelihood of catching on. So if you put more emphasis in the behaviors that you expect to see, of course, the paperwork has to get done. E-Verify has to get done. Direct deposit has to get done. I'm not saying that I-9 form isn't important, but those things, check the box, move on, and then really get to an immersive experience. Okay. Continued with immersive experience really as the inside out focus on learning and development is our typical training compliance skills checklist, right? You have that learning management system, you make sure everybody takes all their classes, you send out emails to managers saying, hey, please remind your person to do this class or that class. Again, not that the classes aren't important. Oftentimes, you've got classes like bloodborne pathogens, you've got classes like harassment avoidance, all really important, right? Not suggesting they aren't. But are we really building capabilities that drive patient results? Empathy, collaboration, adaptability, and digital fluency in care delivery, right? Are those the things that we're focused on? All right. Moving on to the next stage of performance and feedback, right? Again, that traditional approach is we're going to have an annual evaluation. There's going to be ratings. More of an outside-in focus is that continuous coaching linked to clinical quality and patient experience metrics. Recognizing behaviors that reflect our brand promise to patients, right? So do we know what our brand promise is in HR? And are we making sure that everything that we do, that all of our feedback tools, right, that they're reinforcing our mission, our vision, and our values, and that people know what good looks like? And that leads us to engagement and culture, right? Again, so near and dear to my heart. It's intentional culture. You will hear me say over and over again that culture is built one interaction at a time. And I think we see that here in this description, right? Like, so how do you know what your engagement is? How do you know what your culture is? We've been doing surveys for years, right? Gallup started their, Great Place to Work surveys, I think, with Hospital Corporations of America. And so it was, that is one of the places in those Gallup polls was one of the places where we first started seeing data that showed us that if nurses and other licensed professionals in the hospital setting were happy, then our patients were happy. And so those employee satisfaction surveys are certainly important. But, more specifically, are we creating environments where those caregivers feel cared for, right? Does our healthcare staff feel like the system that they're working for cares for the patients, but also do those healthcare systems care for them as people, right? Engagement is measured by psychological safety. Do I feel safe bringing something up to my supervisor? Do a lot of the psychological safety work, what this study was around, errors and medication errors, and is it a safe environment to report when errors are made? And so, definitely, if you've not done any reading on psychological safety, I would highly encourage it. Also, we want to measure teamwork. We want to measure folks' willingness to recommend. So that's that employee net promoter score, right? Which I definitely do use in my current environment. We, on a quarterly basis, we ask the net promoter score question: would you recommend Guidelight Health as a great place to work? All right. And then that retention and recognition. Yeah, look, we can do the traditional give out service awards, but that outside in focus, are we demonstrating that we value the whole person? Do we have flexible scheduling? That is hard in healthcare. 24/7 staffing in a lot of cases, right? And if not 24/7, certainly, both day and evening. It's not easy to find people who want to work in the evening. It's not easy to find people who want to work long shifts. That flexible scheduling can be really hard, but as we all know ourselves, it's really important. Recognition and innovation in care, and visible appreciation for excellence. So important that you catch people doing it right, and that they feel appreciated for doing it right. All right. So when we do have, look, I mean, one of the stages of the employee life cycle is definitely the end, right? There will be separations, whether that's because the employee chooses to move on to something else, maybe they move, maybe they go back to school, whatever the reason would be, there are separations, right? People don't stay forever. I mentioned, early on in our kind of intro slide, right, when I was talking about the different stages of the employee life cycle, that we probably don't put enough focus on alumni. It's not something that we really think about. And so this is an area where I think employers could, and healthcare organizations could, make a really big difference in the way they approach this outside in focus, right? So traditional, yeah, let's do exit interviews. Let's find out why the person's leaving. But how actionable is that information? I think exit interviews can be great. I tend to like stay interviews better, meaning, those ENPS interviews, and asking people for feedback on how we can be better while they're still here. But you can also learn a lot from exit interviews. Are we capturing insights to improve the employee journey and strengthen our reputation in the marketplace? So in those exit interviews, when we do them, what are we asking for? Are we open to hearing how we can improve, right? Not doing exit interviews to be prepared to defend ourselves or protect ourselves, right? But to really listen for, how can we be better? How can we improve our reputation in the community? Are we treating former employees as future ambassadors, right? When they leave, they tell people like either that was the best job I ever had, or like, man, stay away from that place, right? So we definitely want to encourage more of an ambassador mentality of the people who leave. All right. So wrapping up for this week, I just want a quick pro tip, right? So you're all going to be in your discussion group or in your discussion threads, choosing one of the stages of the employee life cycle and answering some discussion questions. And then I've asked you to respond to each other. And I just wanted to give you a quick tip on like what might be a great way to respond, right? So person picks the topic of, like my favorite, engagement and culture. And, they talk about those 4 questions and they answer them. And then, a way that you could respond is to think about your own organization And based on your classmates' answer to those 4 questions, how's your organization doing in those areas? Would you say that they're doing well, or would you say that there's room for improvement? So I hope we have a good time in the discussion thread this week. I think we will. Some great topics here. I've so enjoyed getting to know all of you through your intro videos, and can't wait to hear more about your thoughts, your ideas, and your experiences. All right, see you over there.